This is a Parshat podcast brought to you by Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study, and I'm your host, Yosefa Fogel-Rubel. Let's learn. Welcome to our Bamidbar series. We'll go back to the series and its theme in a moment, but a few housekeeping announcements first. Did you know that each episode of this podcast since Parshat Bereshit is filmed in a studio and available on YouTube? I recently discovered that not everybody knows that. So please check us out and get to know another side of the podcast over on YouTube. This podcast episode is sponsored in honor of the birthday of Doba Isaacs, a beloved fan of the podcast that I've had the pleasure of already meeting twice. It's sponsored with love by her children. Mom, your unwavering commitment to Torah learning and passion for sharing its insights continually inspires your family, friends, and community. Wishing you many more years of strength and joy. I want to remind you that sponsoring an episode is a wonderful way to show your gratitude for the high-level content we try and put out each week. Be in touch with us at podcast@matan.org.il or with the Matan office to sponsor another one of the Bamidbar episodes. Lastly, I want to remind you to check out Matan's summer program this summer, during which you can hear both myself and my amazing guest for today, who we'll get to in a moment. The summer program is called Two Sides to the Story. It's in memory of our dear friend, Dr. Dodi Fishman-Tobin. And there's going to be an array of wonderful classes that are basically going to explore multifaceted interpretations and different kind of ways at looking at different narratives and texts in our Jewish lives and learning. Enjoy this and more. Of course, there'll be tiulim, there'll be trips each week. You can join for a class, for a day, for a week, or for the full 3-week program. Check out the Matan website for more information on that. As is my usual custom, I will open this episode with a general introduction to the book of Bamidbar before introducing today's partner in conversation. The setting of the book is, of course, in the wilderness, but the people move around during this period. The first 10 chapters surround their stay in the Sinai desert and covers a mere 20 days. The second section, chapters 10 through 20, primarily focus on their stay in Kadesh Barnea and several stops along the way. The third section, chapters 20 through 36, detail their travels from Kadesh to Avot Moav on the border of Israel. Geographically, this connects perfectly between the Mishkan Sinai base in Vayikra and Avot Moav base in the Book of Dvarim. Somewhere between the second and third sections, we pass through 38 years. Time moves oddly in the Book of Bamidbar. We'll hear more about this, I'm sure, in today's conversation. The content of the book also is really a zigzag mixture of law and narrative, a combination at times which seems random. One of the best examples of this is the enigmatic law of the Parah Aduma, which seems to come at random. However, its recording precedes the deaths of Miriam and Aharon and the announced death of Moshe. This ritual provides a framework for processing, both on a technical level of purity and impurity and an emotional framework for processing the loss of a generation and its leaders. I'm sure we will touch more upon this again in our conversation today. Much of the legal sections of the book also highlight foundational communal issues that arise when trying to anchor a vision in reality, like the impure individuals who just couldn't bring their sacrifice on time, and Pesach Sheni, like the women who were left out of the initial inheritance laws who come and speak their mind and clarify the law. Parshat Bamidbar itself opens with the census of the people, a description of the organization of the camp, which tribes travel together, and ends with the Mishkan responsibilities of each Levitic family. The thread that connects the first and third sections of the Parsha is the hovering danger potential in this transitional space. The census has direct connection to those eligible for war, and the refrain the Parsha ends with regarding Levitic work is that as long as instructions are followed, the Levites will live and not die from their responsibilities. This vaguely recalls the sons of Aharon who did make this fatal mistake. This year's Bamidbar episodes surround the topic of leadership, but we'll delve more into this theme in later episodes. Today will be a broader introduction to the book, and I also just want to remind us that a few weeks ago on the podcast feed, in the parallel series that we've been airing on 7 readings for a post-October 7th world, I sat with Rachel Sharansky Danziger, and we actually also spoke about the book of Bamidbar as being this model for what happens when what one thinks is a short-term journey ends up becoming a very, very long one, and that was a very meaningful perspective on the book of Bamidbar. So if you somehow missed that, I really encourage you to listen to that maybe in tandem with this episode this week. My partner in conversation today is new to the podcast. Welcome, Gila Fine.
Thank you.
Who is the author of The Mad Woman in the Rabbi's Attic, Rereading the Women of the Talmud. For those of you who are listening, I'm holding up the book for those to see. So if you haven't seen it, please check it out. Check out the beautiful website, Gila's website, and more about the book, which was the winner of the 74th National Jewish Book Award and the 2020 Rabbi Sachs Book Prize. She is a lecturer professor of rabbinic literature, exploring the tales of the Talmud through philosophy, literary criticism, psychoanalysis, and pop culture. Gila serves in the faculties of Shalem College, the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies, the Tikva Scholars Program, the Nachshon Project, and the London School of Jewish Studies, and previously served as editor-in-chief of Magid Books. Gila, it's great to have you.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you.
And I also appreciate it because while there's something very organic about having you for Talmudic Conversations, I have cornered you into talking to us today about the book of Bamidbar. And I'm sure we'll see that there's going to be some interplay between both your style and perspectives and how also you're going to look at the broader biblical story. So I sort of want to bring us into this idea of the book of Bamidbar as there's something very transitional about it. In theory, we like to look at the book of Dvarim as transition, but it's really short, meaning it spans a really short period of time. So we could speak about a transition, but when it's short and it's largely a speech, there's something slightly more composite and compact about that. Whereas the book of Bamidbar is covering a lot at the beginning, a little bit at the end, and there's many years in between where there's tremendous amount of silence. And so it really is a book that accompanies us along this journey that, as I said in the introduction, wasn't supposed to be so long, and then it ends up much longer than we imagined. So maybe why don't we speak to sort of how we can look at the book of Bamidbar as a whole, if we're sort of taking it in an at-a-glance kind of way.
So whenever I think about the book of Bamidbar, and you're right, I'm not a Bible teacher, although I do on occasion speak about Bible when I really have to. I generally think about this problem, which is well known in the TV industry, called the fourth season curse. Have you heard of the fourth season curse?
I have heard of it.
So you have
in books, it's with sequels, no?
Is there a fourth sequel curse? I don't know. I'm less familiar with that.
Yeah.
But in TV, it's definitely a thing. So you've got this TV show, and it starts off really strong, and the first 3 seasons are solid, and you fall in love. And then by season 4, it kind of loses steam, and you get a sense that the creators have perhaps run out of ideas, and the writing gets a bit sloppy, and the storylines become more and more far-fetched. I think this might be a useful way of thinking about Bamidbar, because in the TV show that is the Torah, we start with 3 very strong seasons, right? Bereshit, Shemot, Vayikra, 3 very solid books, very clear tone, very well-defined plot lines, obvious overarching theme. And then we get to book 4, and things get a little bit messy, which is what you touched upon in your introduction. We have this strange jumble of law and narrative where the laws seem to have been just lifted directly out of Vayikra, and the stories seem better placed in Shemot. We have, as you said, this strange non-linear timeline where the first 9 chapters occur in just 20 days. Then time moves backwards by a month, and then it jumps forward by 38 years. We've got these outlandish, like jump the shark moments of killer serpents and talking donkeys and the earth swallowing people whole. And perhaps most problematic, there seems to be a lack of a clear overarching theme. And you can see this in the very name of the book. On the one hand, Bamidbar, desert, wilderness, chaos. On the other hand, as the rabbis call it, Chumash Pkudim, or the Book of Numbers, census, order. And these are 2 themes, order and chaos, that really exist cheek by jowl throughout the book of Bamidbar, which begins in perfect order and then descends into complete chaos, only to return to order by the end. And so, is this the cursed 4th season of the Torah? Does the creator, with a capital C, run out of ideas? Or, as I now firmly believe, having looked more closely at the book, is it actually the most intricately structured of the 5 books of the Torah, and perhaps the critical turning point in the story of the people of Israel?
Yeah, I would say it's almost also the season, as I said earlier, that wasn't planned. It's a season that wasn't planned. And there's something about when when a life quake happens, right? Something in our life that wasn't supposed to be, that we lose our footing. We feel like the trapdoor was opened up beneath us. And then it takes time, a nice amount of time, maybe even 38 years, but it takes a nice amount of time to sort of, we're not going to go back to the order that was. We can't really ever recreate that, but we can create for ourselves anew what's supposed to be in the future. And maybe that's like also a big part of this is those disastrous stories, those inverted nuns, and then the breakdowns and Moshe's breakdown and Korach and Meraglim, etc., that really just steer this in a totally different direction. And not only do we lose out on a whole generation of people, but it really takes time to recreate in an order that will be relevant for the new people that are going to receive it.
Exactly. But it's really interesting. You mentioned a life quake. What is it that you consider the life quake that leads to Bamidbar?
I think there's a few, though, here. I'm curious what you think it is.
Oh, no, because my assumption was that something happens before Bamidbar, which leads to the otherwise unexpected book of Bamidbar.
No, well, they know they're going to go through the desert. They know they're going to have a period of time, but how long does it take to get from Sinai to Canaan?
So the 40 additional years, the sin of the spies.
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah. So I think, you touch upon this, but I think there's something more fundamental going on than just, taking a wrong turn. Mm-hmm. I think this always had to be. I think the book of Bamidbar is an inevitable piece of the story of the people of Israel. Mm-hmm. And I'll try and explain why. So let's begin with the piece of the order, right? Yeah. Political thinkers will generally tell us that for a society to be considered ordered and organized and well-functioning, there are 4 critical orders that have to be in place. You have the social order, the political order, the moral order, the religious order. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the opening of the book of Bamidbar, those 4 orders are set out perfectly. Mm-hmm. So you've got the social order, that opening census and that ideal harmonious organization of the Israelite tribe, the encampment where the Israelite people, where every tribe has its tents and its standard. You've got a perfect political order, the uncontested leadership of Moses. The first chapter, explicitly, it says the Israelites did just as Moses commanded. Mm-hmm. You've got the moral order, all these intricate laws for removing from the camp anything that is impure or defiled. And you've got the religious order. You've got a people living in the constant presence of God, directly governed by him. Again, from that initial chunk, you've got at the command of God, they remained encamped, and at the command of God, they journeyed. They kept the charge of God. So really a picture of perfect order.
And the priests. We'll put in the Kohanim there.
Well, the uncontested, I spoke about the uncontested leadership of Moses, but certainly the priests as well. I know
they're in that religious piece.
Yeah, they're 100%.
That order. They had their flaw. They figured it out. We had the death of the sons, but now they've figured out what their role is.
Yeah, everything is in place. Everything is exactly as it ought to be. Mm-hmm. And those are the first 10 chapters. And then suddenly, and with really no apparent reason, everything falls apart. We have a complete breakdown of the social order, where this ordered tribal division becomes an erev rav, a mixed multitude, and the harmony gives way to complaining and unrest, and the camp is ravished by fires and plagues and killer serpents, as I mentioned. You've got a complete breakdown of the political order, where all of a sudden the leadership of Moses is contested, and at one point with Korach nearly overthrown. Mm-hmm. You've got the breakdown of the moral order, where the once pure camp descends into all manner of immorality and adultery and idolatry. And you've got the breakdown of the religious order. At the point of the sin of the spies, God cries out, the people who have rejected me. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, what you call the life quake. Why does everything fall apart so abruptly and so completely? How do we go in that short space between the last verse of Bamidbar 10 and the first, which are those nuns, and the first verse of Bamidbar 11, from such perfect order to such utter chaos?
Is it okay if I respond?
No, you may not.
Meaning there's a very clear sense that those first chapters are entirely theoretical. Meaning I am very doubtful that those were ever really... It's that veneer, right? It's the veneer that we can have where somebody looks really put together, but after 3.5 seconds, you see that it's really a show and they're not really there. Meaning there's, I would say it's the theory meets the reality. Meaning I don't necessarily believe that was yet put into practice in a way, right? We know Chet Egel. We know when things can go awry. There's something there that feels almost, it's what we hope will be. It's the, Ratzui v'matzui, meaning we hope that it'll be like that, but it's not really like that. And then, so the book progresses and you see, okay, that's great. We're aiming for that, but what's the reality on the ground? Meaning I'm asking, did it fall apart or was it ever together to begin with? Question. I don't know.
So I'm going to respond to your question, if I may, and perhaps offer an alternative, because I take these first 10 chapters of Bamidbar at face value. I take them at their word. I do believe that after the travails of the book of Shmot, the people managed to reach something. Again, that final moment of the people traveling with God in their midst, I don't think that's theory. I think that's actually what happened. And I don't think it was that fleeting either. I think that was a very real existence of the people of Israel in the desert over a period of time. I think what's happening here, I'd like to suggest, might be slightly different. And I think to understand what, I'd like to turn to the cultural anthropologist Victor Turner. So, yes, society needs order. We know that. But orders have a way of becoming outdated. The best order conceived in one reality will no longer work once that reality changes. And so we find ourselves stuck in an order which may have been very real and may have made perfect sense once, but now no longer serves its purpose. And in those moments, what we actually need are pockets of chaos. Victor Turner calls these liminal times and liminal spaces. Times and spaces where the old order breaks down, where old institutions are allowed to die so that new ones can be born. And I want to suggest that that's the book of Bamidbar. It's order through chaos to a new order. Because, yes, there is that moment of perfect order. I believe it was longer than just a moment. I don't think it was that fleeting. I think it was the existence of the people of Israel, as I say, for quite a while. But it's an order which is very soon going to become outdated. It's a camping in the desert order. It's a travel order. It's an order for life in the wilderness, which will no longer serve a purpose once the people enter the land.
Right. And then if you try and sustain that for a long time, it's also taking an order that was created. It's a question if it was created for a temporary existence or we're going to create some version of that permanently. But it's kind of, I imagine, the sense of what happens to people who went on a trip, right? They pack their bags, again, mentally, but they pack their bags for a week and a half. And you come with a certain amount of patience and a certain amount of equipment and a certain, right? And then when things start shifting, again, whether it's because it actually was already decreed to be longer or you realize like, oh, this isn't really what I thought it was going to be. Like just because it was different when I thought, then you start losing grip as a society on those like evolved faculties of yours, right? You start losing a grip on your patience. And I think of the system that I exist in very often just in a family system, meaning like an organic harmony moment. It's a moment. It doesn't last very long because people, young and old, lose their grip on all of those, held together spaces. So there's also an element here of once order is achieved, to say it crassly, people already start getting bored and they start needing something new or they need a new challenge or, that was interesting, but I don't really think that works anymore. And so you start all of a sudden, the orderliness gets old for people. So that's very interesting because, again, I see it completely opposite. And this perhaps could be a change of just a difference in our respective characters. I know it's certainly the case for me. But generally,
the field of philosophy that deals with ethics pays a lot of attention to what it calls the cost of change. Because the belief is that change always comes at a cost, at a big cost. We humans are naturally resistant to change.
Yeah.
We actually love to fall back on the known and the familiar. We are primarily motivated by inertia. And so I don't think, and I say this perhaps as somebody who's not very familiar with the sensation of boredom, so maybe this is me kind of just, this is how I see the world, but I don't think it's so much that people get bored with order. I think it's that order stops working, and often it's the opposite. The order stops working, and it has to break down brutally and completely for people to really be forced to change. People really have to be able to look at this complete breakdown, this chaos that emerges, and say, oh, this isn't working anymore. In fact, it's probably not been working for a while. We've just refused to see it. And again, this is very much how I read.
It may or may not relate to our current reality.
I think about this a lot when it comes to the current reality, and I think we'll sort of get there as well, because yes, I think the book of Bamidbar is one of ultimately great hope. But yeah, I think the people come out of Egypt, they've already been through this one tectonic change in their existence. They were forced from slavery into freedom. And you might think that's a great change, but every change is hard. And specifically this change we know is traumatic for the people of Israel. That's the chipazon, which yanks them out of Egypt. And it might have been a horrible reality, but it was a known reality and a familiar reality, which is why you have these Israelites just yearning to go back. Not because it was better, it was obviously not better, but it's what they knew. And they're in the desert. They've managed to somehow, again, after the turbulence of the book of Shemot, they forged this order for themselves. And I completely understand why at this point they just want to hold on to what they have. This is the order. We've managed to create this beautiful camp, and it's all pure and it's all harmonious and it's all peaceful. Let's just hold on to what we have. But they can't, because that's not their destiny. They're going to have to enter the land, and the order that they have is no longer going to be relevant. And so everything, the social institutions, the leadership, the morality, the religion, they all have to die so that a new order can be born. And I want to suggest that that's exactly what happens, again, in that brief space between the last verse of Bamidbar 25 and the first verse of Bamidbar 26. So Bamidbar 25 is the lowest moment of the book. It's the sin of the daughters of Moab, right? This orgy of idolatry and adultery and dissent. This is the people hitting rock bottom. The social, political, moral, religious orders, they've all collapsed. This is complete chaos, the final and the ultimate breakdown of order. And then one verse later, again, out of nowhere, a new census, a new order, forged in this liminal space of the wilderness. All of a sudden we see emerging a new social order. Except this one is no longer for how to camp in the desert. This one is for how to divide the land. We have a new political order. No longer Moses, the leader in exile, but rather Joshua, the warrior who will conquer the land. We have a new moral order. Not one for preserving the purity of the camp, but rather the one for maintaining the laws within the cities that will eventually be built. And we have a new religious order where God once again dwells amongst the people, although this time the people govern themselves. Toward the end of the book of Bamidbar, God says, and again I'll quote, "Do not defile the land which you inhabit, for I, God, dwell among the Israelite people." And I think this is the story of Bamidbar. Again, order through chaos to new order. An old order has to die, and it's brutal, and it's difficult, and it's painful. But from this chaos, a new order emerges a better order, an order which can lead the people into their future.
What are some of the improvements that you see in the new order over the old one?
Well, I say better order, but I only mean better as in better suited for the reality that they're about to inhabit, which is an autonomous people living sovereignly on their land. And so what you have here in this book of Numbers, or the book of Bamidbar, right? Census and wilderness, order and chaos, is, I think, the most intricately structured book of the Torah. And as I just said, I think the one that holds the most hope for us today, because what you have here, in a nutshell, is the eternal story of the Jewish people. It's a story that we Jews have returned to again and again and retold throughout our long history, which has been difficult and chaotic and has seen so many moments of destruction. It's a story that's referred to throughout the Bible when we look at, well, I should say it's the story that basically recognizes that order has to die so that a new order can be reborn. That sometimes you have to have destruction to lead to redemption. That the seed of deliverance is located in the heart of darkness. And so we see that story referred to again and again in the Bible when we speak about the dark years of Egypt, the years of enslavement and torture, which were essentially the crucible where we were forged as a people. We see this come up again and again in rabbinic literature, in the Talmud, where the rabbis who live very much under the shadow of the destruction of the Second Temple and the loss of sovereignty and the massacring of thousands, they return to this story and they tell it again and again in their writings. And that's how we have this idea that the Messiah is born on Tisha B'Av. Because, again, redemption is born in destruction. We have this rabbinic idea that the redemption is like the break of day because it happens in the darkest moment of night. We have the famous story of Rabbi Akiva laughing when he sees the foxes prowling Temple Mount, because where the other rabbis see the realization of the prophecies of doom, he sees the realization of the prophecies of deliverance. And it's a story that we Jews have gone on to tell after the Crusades of the Middle Ages and after the pogroms of the modern era. It's a story that we saw happening in the 20th century, right? The complete devastation of the Holocaust, which led to the birth of the modern state of Israel. And I find that it is a story that I tell myself repeatedly today in the aftermath of the destruction of October 7th. I hold fast to this idea that redemption comes from destruction, that you sometimes have to hit rock bottom to begin to climb. That sometimes things have to die, and it's difficult and it's painful. But from the death of the old, please God, something new will emerge, and it will be better, and it will, please God, lead us into our future.
When I think about this perspective on the book of Bamidbar, and I'm thinking about the current moment that we're in, I think that one of the things that's so challenging, Gila, is that we have this book in front of us and we see the breakdown, and then we see, oh, but look, there's the third section of the book of Bamidbar, and we see it's being rebuilt and it's growing. There's that moment between the darkness and daybreak. There's that moment between the breakdown and thinking about new order. I'm thinking also about this idea of the book of Bamidbar, the tool that's used to start recreating order is counting things. And I'm reflecting as you're speaking, thinking about myself and the people I know. What are the tools we use, or even nationally, what are the tools we use to start gaining control over a chaotic situation? It's a question. It's a question, something that I ask myself every day in little moments of chaos, and then this broader question on a national level. But so I'm thinking about these two pieces of the lived experience of transition from the dark to the light is not as clear cut when you're living in that moment as it is when it's presented literarily in a book, right? Or when we can think about history 50 years from now and say, oh, well, that happened, but then that happened. But sometimes in between those two things, there's like 3 years, or there's so many other things that happen. And so that what in the blink of an eye historically is a blink, when you're living through it, doesn't feel that way. And to go from breakdown to a new order often requires a whole host of creations of things that failed, and we're going to try this, and we're going to try this new political organization or whatever it is. And so that to me is also the difficulty of the lived experience of that. And so it's neater when we speak about it when it comes to Bamidbar, and I think that it's absolutely correct. And we see also just the perspective of the last portion of the book is literally the eye is now towards the land. We're really not looking anymore at the desert. But in the lived experience of how that is, it's really hard.
It's extremely hard. And I don't feel equipped to answer many of those questions because I'm not a political thinker.
Yeah, no.
And I'm not, a commentator on current affairs. I'm a literature person. And you're right, the story is always neater when it's folded between two covers of a book. Mm-hmm. But the great chesed that we have today, that the Israelites in Bamidbar didn't have, is we have their story neatly presented to us between two covers of a book. Mm. And so how do we rebuild? That is a question that wise and more experienced people than I think have to tackle. But what I can do as somebody who deals in stories is to say, we've been here before. And you can be sure that the Israelites back then, who were living in the middle of it, as you say, found it agonizing and despairing and couldn't see hope. And they didn't have their own book of Bamidbar to be able to point to and say, it worked out then, it's going to work out now. But we do. We're able to look at Bamidbar and to get the inspiration, and not just Bamidbar, as I say, the story of the Exodus. We have an example just a few decades old, mid-20th century. How could we doubt, given everything we've lived through, that we're not going to survive this and grow from it and create something even better? We've done it so many times before. We don't have the right to despair now. Mm. We have this story. We've been telling it for millennia. And if our ancestors survived and continue to survive, we'll survive this, and it will get better, and we will forge something truer. It's a story we Jews have been telling ourselves for millennia. And it's a story we keep falling back on, and it's a story that really should give us hope today, as much as we are in the middle of things. We have always survived, and we've always hit rock bottom and started to climb again, and we've always managed to find the redemption in the midst of destruction, and please God, we're going to do it again now.
Gila Fine, thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you.
It's a real pleasure, and I'm also a deep lover of story, so I'm happy that we have that love in common, and my prayer is with yours that I believe it as well, and I think that there's also sometimes we get impatient and we get used to short-term thinking, and we live in a region of peoples who are really good at long-term thinking, and we just, that's one of those tools that I think we also need to sort of refine for ourselves, and I'm with you on that belief, and thank you for reminding us in the most beautiful of ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode from Matan Women's Institute for Torah Study. If you would like to sponsor an episode, please contact the Matan office or email me at podcast@matan.org.il. Please do us and all women's Torah learning a favor and share this episode with all of your friends and family.